Hi all, welcome to the EOF Implementers Call number 20. Let's just go ahead and get started with some client updates. Does anybody want to start us off?
Besu, I'm working on implementing Create 3. I think that brings us up to parity. I haven't committed it yet, won't be until next week, but that'll bring us up to parity with EVM 1. That includes the renumbering of the code sections. With some of the things in flux as far as changing the container ordering and opcode numbering. I don't know that there is a single unified spec most everyone's implementing to. So we're not, like at all the other clients, I think we're stuck in Denkun interrupt mode. So there's not able to get too much time focused on this right now.
Is the mega EOF spec not what people are targeting? Is there like changes to it that haven't been reflected?
Not everyone's implemented all the changes. There's also some changes that just went in with stack height that are proposed and haven't gone in for final yet. So it's still a bit in flux. We haven't had a big interop hubbub around a version like we did back around December, January.
Okay, but there is a spec version that people can be implementing to.
Right. Not everyone is up
Okay.
to date on that.
Okay. That makes sense. Great. Other client updates? Cannot hear you if you're speaking, Andre. Still no. While Andre is working on his audio, do you have any updates, Hyman? Amazing. Okay, let's just jump to compiler updates, and when Andre comes back, he can say what's been going on with EVM1. Anything on the compiler front?
Nothing for me. Been a little busy.
Cool. That's probably it for compilers. Dano, I know that you've got a couple things you want to discuss on the spec. Do you want to go ahead and get started talking about extra data?
Sure. I was hoping to get more of the Epsilon team and other people, involved in the theoretical parts of it, to get consensus around adding ext data load, which is something that has been requested to make it easier for the STOR2 community, I think is what they're calling it. I'm not sure that what they want to refer to themselves as, but where they're using contracts to store immutable data, do things like put vector art for NFTs on chain cost efficiently. So I guess there's not much that can be discussed on that, since there's really not much room to get consensus on and buy-in from Epsilon. Are they out this week? Will they be back in 2 weeks, or is everyone in Denkun in Denkun burnout mode? No one's on from Epsilon, are they?
I'm from Epsilon, but not working now currently on EOF. But Andrzej, if you become back here, he will have some update. And yeah, but this week we are mostly off, and I think next week we will have better availability.
Okay. Trying to find where the agenda items I added were. Got so many things with juggling right now. Is also the other problem. So the
I pasted the issue in chat.
838. Okay. So the first one was the exe code data, and the data opcodes. I guess that's another question for Epsilon. Does anyone need help writing it? Is it coming along? Is it? Yeah. So we need to get some final specs out. And then finally, my last question was about the proposed stack range change that Viper was asking for its outlining, to see if that would have been sufficient. So you got to get a progress status on that, because from looking at the spec, it feels like those might be last issues. And then I think we can look into starting to pack things up and ship it, or at least do a dress rehearsal for shipping it, and make sure that that's everything the community needs. So that's my take on it. I don't know if other people think there's other things that are broken or need to be revised or need to be updated. What their opinions and thoughts on this are. Because if we get the stack range change, we may not need call FI and jump FI. Or maybe we do. That's why I need to hear from Viper.
From Viper's perspective, well, I was looking at the thing that Andre proposed, and it's yeah, I think that the allowing forward recursion, yeah, this forward jump thing, but not the backward jump thing, feels a little awkward from a design perspective. But if it works, it works. I think the main issue is going to be with the retf stack cleaning thing. So given all of the options so far, and given that I also haven't made that much progress with Pavel on the being able to outline everything entirely, just because of bandwidth reasons, call FI and jump FI are looking like probably the easiest way to move forward here, unless we do make some progress on this
Okay.
alternative implementation.
Okay, and I'm fine with that status. We don't need to push it to resolutions today. I'm just mostly trying to keep a running list of what the open issues are. And as that list approaches zero, once it's zero and we have answers on that, I think we could say that we're ready to propose a shipping version of it. So if more issues come up, don't hide them, bring them up.
I think we should still be tracking alternatives to create 3, or where it can take potentially an external address, init code at an external address. And this isn't like a deal breaker or anything, but I think it would be nice if init codes were validated when they get on chain for the first time, instead of, I mean, I think that's just more efficient overall if they get validated the first time instead of every time create is called an init code.
Okay. So you say validate init code first time they come on chain. That would be if it's in a subcontainer, or just when it's in a transaction and you cache the results?
No, when it's in a subcontainer. Like I think that maybe we just need an init code kind, section kind.
So I kind of went with that with createF. And I think the problem we get into it is you get into the init code. To run the init code, you need to know specifically what the address is that you're developing to. So that would involve I mean, maybe it's not a bad thing. Maybe the address is still going to be a function of the contract of the factory contract and the section that's the init code. Versus, that's going to be the thing to make it unique if you have different init codes to call that init code.
Oh, why do you need the address that it's deploying to in order to validate it?
Because not to validate it, but to execute it.
Yeah.
You can still call the address opcode inside of init code. And it's supposed to return the address that you're at.
Yeah, sure.
So we would need to have in that spec. So that's why for my create F spec, I would have to drop the split returns, because you wouldn't know, the key parts of the address would come from whether you're returning from the container or returning from some external source. You would still need to know where it's coming from. And yeah, so that's one of the issues. Yeah, so that's still open. I'll mull on it and try and maybe iterate on my create F to see if we can get something there. But that was the issue I ran into, was how do we define what the hash is going to be for the derivative address and make sure that it's got the right kind of protections you would want to see from create 2, or probably possibly safer than create 2. I don't think we can prevent, well, we're getting rid of self-destruct. So in one way we can, but prevent multiple contracts being deployed, possibly for the same init code based on call parameters. Because the idea is that the original create 2 proposal, the idea was you would put some money at a remote address with a fixed hash, and you would have certainty as to what it is. And I guess the argument there is you go read the init code, you make sure it's not polymorphic and make sure it's only going to result in 1. So that just increases the level of knowledge. But those are the concerns that I would want to see resolved for this. Create copy is easy. You just point to the address and that would be part of the opcode. But you would need to have the address resolved and solid before you start running the first operation of the init code, in case the first thing they do is ask for the address. So that's, in those proposals, that's one thing we would need to work on.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you can do something which is just like validate the outside container if it has subcontainers.
That's the current proposals. You validate the outside container, and then when a good client will catch its validations.
The first layer of the init code. Yeah,
Oh, so you just the first layer, just the first subcontainers, but you don't validate subcontainers.
Right. Yeah, exactly. If you see anything which has like section kind init code, which I'm not sure exists yet, but I think it would be useful to have that distinction between data and init sections, init code sections. But if you see those, then you validate the outer layer of that thing. And I think that would just save a lot of gas at runtime. Because then you don't have to run the validation again every deploy.
Yeah, let me think about it while I'm on the plane. I think there might be something in creative. I'll have to think about all the implications on it. Okay.
Yeah, and then this nice to have would be able to deploy from init code that's not in the current contract, but from an external contract. So an additional address parameter.
So you want both init code in the contract and be able to reference an external contract for the init code?
It's not a showstopper, but it's a nice to have.
Couldn't we do that with a factor pattern?
That's why I said it's not a showstopper, but
okay.
Yeah, it requires special factory contracts and so on.
All right, I'll add that to the still open list. Call FI, create opcode, where we copy external contracts by address, validate subcontainers inside of EOF. Yes or no. Solutions to not having to WNS containers or factories, along with ext data copy and stack range. Okay. All right. So I'll add that. I added that to the agenda. It's still open items. Okay. So unless we have like a Powell or some of the other original
We've
authors
got-
of EOF.
We've got Axic and Andre on here now.
Oh, actually, Andre on here. Okay. Should I start up with my beginning of my list again then?
Go for it.
So one thing we discussed in the past few calls was a need for ext data copy in the data opcodes. This would make the job a lot easier for contract storage based solutions rather than having to go through an interface, ask for the data through the ERC method. I know that was initially deliberately dropped from the spec. How strongly does Epsilon feel about adding it in?
I personally am slightly against, just to not increase the scope, but not super against, especially if someone else works on the spec.
Okay. ASIC?
Yeah, sorry, I've been kind of out of the loop for various reasons. I imagine this instruction would be similar to what we discussed in Edelweiss.
Yep, it's
They
exactly
would-
it.
Yeah, that somehow we get an init code into an account and then we have the instruction to deploy from that account, right?
Oh, so this is a separate issue. I started back at the beginning. We're just talking about the XT data copy. We also talked about the create copy issues as a separate one that Viper was concerned about. But I was starting at the ext data copy opcode.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I have no reasons against it. I think the only reason we
Okay.
left it out was just for the scope.
So the next point was if you need help writing the spec, if I were to write it, it could go in. Is that what I heard from Andre?
Yeah, I won't
big-
oppose it. Yeah. if you
Okay, the
just-
big blocker is writing up the spec. So I'll add that. I'll add that to my plate then. That I'll do a first draft on the data opcode ZIP unless someone else already has a draft that they're working on. Cool.
I think
And
I have
then-
like a soft pushback.
Huh?
Just I do have like a soft pushback, just generally to the notion of increasing the scope because we have been so far unlucky, to get this into mainnet. And I guess initially we did start with like a really simplified spec, and then over time we extended it. But now we're getting into territory where it's going to be like, I don't know, 25 instructions. So I'm kind of worried that our chances are getting even lower with all of that. Long story short, maybe the best way, I did miss like the first 10 minutes, so maybe there was like a really strong reason that we want X data copy. But I would probably put it into like a separate optional EIP, that specific instruction. And or at least emphasize that we can launch without it.
Okay. Because we have to have the data copy ones. That's given. So I could put ext in a separate file, and that could be advanced separately. Because it's
Yeah, I definitely like the notion you brought up, months ago, that if somebody wants X data copy, they can actually have like maybe like a 5 instructions in their contract to perform that, right, with a call.
okay.
Did that notion change?
It's
I
still
guess
there.
it's just a
They
gas optimization
there was
question,
concern about gas optimizations, yes. And we don't have too many real world examples. So if we have 2 EIPs going forward, one with data opcode and one with ext data copy, then there's a
Or did
possibility
you
they
get
both could
it,
go in.
or is it me?
I'm willing to write these if time's the issue, both of them, or one of them just the ext data copy, and you have the other data opcodes. Either way, just let me know what would help. And Alex's internet just went out.
I can work on data or code spec this week,
Okay,
except X data copy.
so I'll write a separate one on EXT data copy, and then we can advance them separately and see what the appetite of all core devs is. Okay. And then the rest of the open issues that I pasted into the agenda, call FI, jump FI. Again, there's the meta concern about too many opcodes. The create opcode for external is the same. Open question about validating subcontainers instead of EOF containers. Currently, the spec is no validation, and you validate when you use the stuff pulling out of the container. Yeah. So I think those are still the open issues.
Yeah, validation I also will have to think about because somehow we rejected this idea in the beginning in Austria.
Yeah.
So I have to remember the reason. Still didn't have time to remember. So I'm not sure. Maybe it can be possible. Also about Callify and Jumpify, I had one question or thought that it so far only Jumpify makes sense to me because Callify, if you call a function with outputs, what would it do in case it's not the condition is
Oh.
false?
That's a good
That
question.
can-
I think that it should only be allowed for
Non-returning, or rather returning zero.
things that don't modify the stack, right?
I mean, is it needed at all? Maybe we can do with Jumpify only.
I think I have to double check because we wrote our code when Jumpify was not on the table. And so I need to check if it violates the assumptions or something.
Okay.
Because I thought these were only needed for like outlining reverts. So you would jump into a terminal function anyway, so you wouldn't need a return.
Right. I'm not sure if you can use Jumpify for that or if you need Callify. Probably you can use Jumpify.
Yeah, because if the only exit from the function is a revert or a return, then there's no need to call a retf.
Yeah. I think Callify is okay, but only if it doesn't change the stack because it's very in that way. It's and Andre, you're right. It's like very different from our Jumpify. It doesn't actually affect control flow. It's just conditionally jumping to this function, but like the next instruction is going to be the next instruction, right? There's no, yeah. It doesn't actually conditionally change the PC.
Okay. Anything else that Epsilon wants to share or voice concerns about or open discussion about?
At least not from my side. I just wanted to give a tiny bit of update in the sense that I think we have been mostly focusing on EVM Max and work related to that. If you're not aware of what EVM Max is, it's a very simple instruction set, just three, 4 instructions. And it makes it possible to implement a lot of the precompiled and elliptic curve functions. And I think we're probably going to get to the point in a month that that we get back to the EOF part of that. We're trying to implement this on the EVM directly, but instead of what we have done in the past few months is using the same primitives, but implementing all of that in C++, just to validate the idea that those primitives, which would go into being EVM instructions, those are actually enough to implement the actual precompiles. And I think we did prove that. And so like a second stage will be to actually move that over to EVM. And then the EOF requirements are the discussions we had at Edelweiss, that there would be probably some kind of like a setup section or a different kind of memory, etc. In any case, I think there will be more connections of this work with the EOF work at that point. And I think this may be the reason we have been we had less output on EOF, because we put the effort into EVM Max in the past few months.
So would EVM Max be required in the first revision of EOF, or could it come in on a follow-on revision? How tight is it?
No, it should not be.
Okay.
We don't want to make any more complications into EOF.
Okay, so it could target Osaka and EOF could target Prague.
Exactly.
All right. So that brings up a meta question. How do we want to proceed in advocating this to all core devs? Do we think it's ready enough to give a presentation like Verkle Trees gave? Do we want to wait until after Denkun to have that presentation?
For
Until,
EOF? Or EVM Max? For EOF or EVM Max?
For EOF. So Verkle Trees, I mean, people are familiar with Verkle Trees, and they gave a status update to all core devs. Do we want to give a similar one just for EOF, or maybe for EOF and EVM Max, or maybe two separate ones to kind of advocate for our position and make sure that it's on the schedule? Or do we just want to go straight to putting it into when we start talking about Prague stuff, proposing it as the headliner?
No, I definitely like the idea that we should start advocating for it. Yeah, because we did hear it, a number of times that stuff was proposed late, and why is it even considered? And yeah, I mean, there's only so much space left in people's minds regarding what is important, and it's in many cases a game of what do they hear about the most, right? So yeah,
Yep.
I think we definitely should start giving updates about the EOF, and just to have it a discussion point.
Okay. Is this a presentation we want to give in 3 weeks or 5 weeks? I don't think we want to go into next week's all core devs. I don't think there's enough prep time for that, although I'm willing to be persuaded against it. I'm wondering if we should propose for 3 weeks, which would be the beginning of September or middle of September. And I think more people will be back at work in September. I think it'll be better then. And Alex just cut out again. So this is something I think we could actually, mid-September sounds good. I think this is something we could coordinate on the Discord channels. Also the issues of who gets the biggest who presents, probably Epsilon, and what the content of the slides are. Because I think, Prague's really starting certainly once we get testnet dates picked out for Denkun, then we can really start shifting into being serious about focusing on what's on Prague. And I think this is the right time to start bringing some of those discussions up. And ASICs go switch devices. So I think that's my meta questions and my issues I'd like to see advanced here. And do we wait for ASIC to switch devices? Still listing. Okay. Is that
It
light
kind of
client?
feels like maybe closer to 5 weeks would give us a bit more time. It still feels we're pretty deep in the thin cone triaging, even like in 3 weeks. I don't know.
Is EIP 663 going to be part of EOF?
Yeah, I think we plan to roll out together with you. It's not
It's
required,
in the
but
spec.
yeah,
Basu has it implemented. I think EVM one has it implemented.
yes.
Because I think that 663 probably needs some changes. I think for it to be really useful, it needs swap NM instruction.
Which one?
Swap NM, swap the nth and
Ah,
mth
I see.
items in the stack.
Oh, swap NM.
And there's, by the way, I don't, since my understanding now is that future EOF versions are the strategy is to try to transpile them, like so EOF v1. If we have EOF v2, then we're going to try to transpile from v1 to v2. Then I actually don't feel as strongly about dupe n swap. Sorry, dupe n starting from 1 instead of 17. Eamon says, what is swap NM useful for? It's very useful for stack scheduling. When you're scheduling items on the stack, right now you need three instructions to schedule things that are more than one item deep in the stack, and you can swap NM allows you to do that in one instruction. And I mean, from the implementation, you can kind of see that it costs the same amount from an implementation perspective.
So a little bit of a tangent as far as the transpilation, my thought was that the transpilation would only be necessary when we do a breaking change. Like, let's say we get rid of the swap X and the dupe X series of operations and rely on swap N dupe N. That would be an incompatible change that we could transpile into. But doing things like adding new operations that don't break things are what I would term forwards compatibles, where the full set of valid EOF programs is not reduced, but only increased. Those I would consider forward compatible. It wouldn't require a version change, wouldn't require transpilation. We just treat it like we've done it before. We just add the new operation. We update the code validation rules. What used to be invalid is now valid. So, adding an operation like swap NM or ext data copy wouldn't require a major version number change. So, yeah. So that's my thought on the need for transpilation. So, like, I'm kind of the desire, the product management thing of making it the smallest necessary change, and then bringing in these other changes later, like swap NM and the ext data copy, I think would be the more prudent one. I am persuaded by Alex. I do want to see ext data copy, but not to the point that it causes EOF as a whole to be rejected. And it, by floating the two separate proposals and proposing swap NM later, that gives us the option of either bringing it into Prague if people think it fits in, or bringing it in Osaka when there's more, when it's already in and we're just growing it to improve the user experience and the compiler experience and making it more accessible.
From my perspective, by the way, swap NM is more important than all the other instructions in EIP 663.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, my concern with dupe and starting from 17 is if we start to remove other dupe instructions, then tooling will have to maintain like we'll have to be able to deal with multiple versions of EOF, which is like not the end of the world, but also not really ideal. So I think it's better if it's kind of more future-proof from the get-go. But it's also, I mean, I think Daniel and Axic's concerns are like, yeah, now there's like duplicate instructions basically, which is weird.
So the Mega EOF spec has dupe n without the 17 shifting. So there is, in essence, a duplicate set of instructions. It's the immediate +1, and they swaps, there's no 16-base shifting. The same as swap, there's no 16-base shifting according to the Mega EOF spec.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I requested from Axic and well, I'm here to say I don't feel that strongly about it anymore, but yeah, the issue of forwards compatibility is, yeah, I don't know really what is the right call here. So maybe leaving it as is just fine.
I like the way it's coded right now. So in case we get rid of it in the future, the transpile burden, if you're using the old dupe codes and the old swap, if you're using dupex or swapx, those just get transpiled into a 2-byte instruction, and the existing dupe n and swap n stay the same. Mild preference, total willing to lose on it, but that's what I like about the current setup. Okay. Any other questions? Should we give people 20 minutes back?
It's good with me. Any last comments? Okay. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll talk again here in 2 weeks. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
See
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.